The NFL draft is finally here. We've been talking about it for quite some time, and it's finally here, but it's a little bit different. And the pageantry and kind of what we expected in Las Vegas is certainly not what it's going to be tonight. So I just want to first and foremost kind of get your thoughts on that and how we can expect to see something so much different than we anticipated just a few months ago.
Yeah, I mean, first, I think it's going to be nice that this is probably going to be the first live-ish sporting event that we've had in like a month and a half. So yeah. I think that's going to be a nice little reprieve for people. Outside of that MJ documentary that aired Sunday night, hadn't been a whole lot going on in terms of sports to watch. So I think it's definitely something everybody's going to be looking forward to. But yeah, it's going to be very unconventional. There's not going to be a lot of glitz and glamour. They were supposed to do this in Vegas. Guys, when they got picked, they were supposed to ride a boat up to the stage on the fountain at the Bellagio. Now they're all going to be at home sitting on their couches for the most part. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of guys participating remotely. The NFL invited 58 players, including 9 total from Auburn, Alabama. So, for those guys, it's going to be still a bit of a special day. I mean, it's going to be special for all these players selected, but these guys in particular are going to be a little bit more involved. Just, they're not going to be wearing $1,000 suits. They're not going to be out there, under the bright lights of Las Vegas. They're just going to be enjoying it from home with their family.
Yeah, and I think that, that takes on its own unique tone in and of itself. And, having the opportunity to talk to some of these guys, Derrick Brown earlier, the past couple of weeks, talked with him, and Noah Igbinoghene as well. 2 guys that did get called up for the virtual draft, as well as Prince Tega Wanongo. And you and I were kind of just talking before we went live here. I'm just curious to know sort of how the NFL went about picking these virtual draft guys and who they wanted to put out there. But you made a good point. It's kind of, a lot of it's probably first and second rounders, but also someone with a good story like Prince Tega. So maybe we'll start with him and sort of why you think he's getting his name called for the virtual draft.
Well, I mean, one, he's a fantastic player. He's still incredibly raw at the position because he's only been playing football for 6-7 years now. He arrived in the U.S. in 2014, originally wanted to play basketball, but then quickly, realized that football was the path forward for him to become a pro. Signed at Auburn as a defensive lineman and then, transitioned over to offensive line. He's a multi-year starter at left tackle for Auburn, but he's still raw at the position. He's inexperienced, but you get him to the NFL, he's got that prototypical body and just sheer athleticism that teams absolutely love. You add to that, I mean, he's a great kid, and he's got a compelling story. Came here 6 years ago from Nigeria with hopes of being a professional athlete, wants to provide for his 8 siblings back there too and kind of pave a better way forward for his whole family.
Yeah, no doubt. Certainly a great story there. And Deshaun Davis was telling us, they call him the Nigerian Nightmare, and certainly, a great story in and of itself. And it's going to be interesting to see sort of where he ends up. When you talk about some of the top round guys, as I said before, Derrick Brown and Noah Igbinoghene both chosen for this virtual draft. So the anticipation is that they will be selected in the first round. Derrick Brown likely to be the first one to hear his name called, in a top 10 pick scenario. What expectations do you have for him as Auburn's top draft pick of this class?
I mean, he's going to be Auburn's highest draft pick since Greg Robinson went second overall 6 years ago. Derrick, he's going to be a guy I fully expect him to have a great professional career, probably a Pro Bowl caliber type career. Where he ends up should be interesting. He's going to be a top 10 pick. I don't see him falling outside of the top 10. A lot of the analysts seem to think he's going to fall to Carolina there at number 7, if not either Arizona at number 8 or Jacksonville at number 9. But you're getting a guy who he's been one of the top defensive linemen in his class for the last 4 years. He signed in 2016 as what was an absurdly talented and deep defensive line recruiting class nationally. I mean, you look at the guys that were in that class. You had Rashawn Gary, you had Nick Bosa, you had Dexter Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
All these guys that were first-round picks last year. And Derrick Brown could have gone into the draft last year and potentially been a late first-round pick, but he decided to gamble on himself, come back for a senior year, and now he's going to be a top 10 lock. It certainly paid off. He was a unanimous All-American. He's incredible against the run. Brings something in pass rushing, but still has room to improve there. But he's just as consistent as it gets. I think for his career, he missed maybe 5 tackles at Auburn.
Wow.
You just know what you're going to get with Derrick Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great story in and of itself. Obviously, him deciding to come back to Auburn, that was a conversation, and talking to Kevin Steele last year, that was a big get for Auburn in terms of recruiting, and it did pay dividends. And, it is a gamble because a lot of time these guys, you just don't know with injuries and obviously, other guys in the draft and where they could end up. And, certainly I imagine when he decided to stay at Auburn, he didn't anticipate the NFL draft looking the way that it is. But, in talking to him the last couple of weeks, he has a positive mindset moving forward. And, he's a pretty even keel guy. So I think he's certainly excited for the opportunity and feels that he can have a great impact wherever he goes early on. Now, Noah Igbinoghene, obviously, this is someone that we've seen his stock on the rise. I would say somewhat flying under the radar, considered a mid-round guy. And now here he is getting an invitation, to the virtual draft. And, that certainly doesn't necessarily mean, I would say, that he's a lock in the first round, but certainly someone that they're eyeballing as an early round guy. And, certainly has an opportunity to make a big impact. So, just where do you see his stock rising in the past couple of weeks? What do you think has really lent itself to that?
Well, I think the thing that really stands out about Noah is his athleticism. I mean, you look at his pedigree; both of his parents were Olympians. He was a high school track star. He came to Auburn as a receiver, and he's only been playing defensive back for 2 years now. He's still learning the position. He's in the similar boat as Prince Tega. Still got room to grow at that position, but just his upside and athleticism is almost second to none. He's not one of the top cornerbacks in this class. There is a clear upper tier of guys, but he's there in that discussion for that second group. And really, how early he goes just depends on what teams feel they really need to make a run on a cornerback. There were some mock drafts in the last month or so that had him going at the very end of the first round. But a lot of the ones that I've seen lately, he's probably going to be a second round guy, which, I mean, that's still great. When he declared for the draft back in January, a lot of people were like, oh, why is he doing this? But he showed at the combine and then again at Pro Day when he, improved his vert to 40 inches, which is just absurd. That he has the physical traits to succeed. He just needs more experience and a little bit more coaching there in the secondary to get a real good feel for the position.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think he was one of those guys that kind of lucked out in the timing of all of this because, it's been unfortunate how many of these guys haven't been able to showcase sort of the skill set and sort of what they've been able to improve upon here in the last couple of months just because of the cancellation of pro days and not being able to get in front of the scouts and sort of having to do everything virtually. So he certainly was one that came out and turned heads. So, that was great for him. Now, someone else that we're looking at, Marlon Davidson, he did not get an invite to the virtual draft, but first and foremost, I want to give a shout out to Wes Steiner. He's got an incredible series called Road to the Pros. It's a 4-part series, so 3 of those being released, and then the 4th after the draft will be released. But, Marlon Davidson, such a great personality. I've really enjoyed watching that series and just getting to know him more off the field. What can you say about him and what makes him a special player and someone that will thrive at the next level?
Well, Marlon, like you say, he's a great kid, great personality. I mean, I can attest that everybody on the Auburn beat here will miss him greatly because he's just a joy to talk to and be around in general. But in terms of a player, you're talking about a guy that he came in as a freshman and was a starter on day one. Auburn hadn't had a freshman starter along the defensive line in something like 30 years at least. And he was just steady throughout his 4 years, started all 4 years, was consistent. As a junior and sophomore, he struggled some finishing plays, and it's something he really set out to improve upon going into his senior year. And I think we saw that drive from him and just that motor on the field. I think as a junior, he said he felt like he left something like 8 or 9 sacks on the field. And then this year he comes in, ties with Derrick Brown for the team lead with 12.5 tackles for loss. Is just a menace along the defensive line. I mean, everything that Auburn achieves defensively starts with that defensive line. And when you have two guys like Derrick and Marlon who feed off each other, and they were roommates and they were competing head to head each week with each other for that SEC Defensive Lineman of the Week award, which, you're talking about Derrick Brown's a top 10 pick. Marlon won more of those awards this season. And, he's got that to hold over Derrick, even though, it's, pretty obvious that Derrick is probably the better player. Mm-hmm. But, you're getting a guy with a high motor and just a absurd amount of confidence in Marlon. Where he fits in the NFL kind of remains to be seen. Obviously, he played mostly defensive end at Auburn. We saw in the last few months he added a little bit more weight to show teams that he can shift more inside, play around the 300-pound range, and still be consistent in what he does with his pass rush and his ability against the run. But I think he's more likely to go in the first round than a guy like Noah Igbinoghene right now. But if not, I'm sure he'll be one of the first names called on Friday in the second round.
Yeah, I think that's certainly some great insight and a good prediction. And to your point, you spend a lot of time on the beat with guys like that. And, I think Marlon's one of those that when you look back years from now, he's one of those that you kind of highlight and say that he'll certainly be missed getting to cover him day in and day out. So, certainly excited to hear all of these guys' name called. Unprecedented kind of for Auburn. Talk about that just a little bit, that Auburn, is now potentially going to draft the most guys they've drafted since 1994. Is that correct?
Well, since the NFL went to 7 rounds, the most Auburn's ever had in a single draft was 6, and that was last year.
Okay.
This year they could have as many as 7 or 8 guys. I mean, we talked about the 4 that we already mentioned. Jack Driscoll is a guy that's probably going to be a mid-round guy. He's been a starter at both UMass and Auburn along the offensive line, and has the flexibility to play pretty much any position along the line, which teams are really going to like, because they can only carry so many offensive linemen on their roster. So you need a guy that has that flexibility to be a reserve, and maybe he, in a couple of years, he works his way up to being a starting caliber offensive lineman in the NFL. But you got him, you got Daniel Thomas, who, another great story, was a last-minute addition to Auburn's signing class 4 years ago. As a freshman, picks off Jalen Hurts twice in the Iron Bowl, even though Auburn lost that game, and then just became an incredibly steady player there in the secondary for Auburn. He's a guy that's probably going to be a late rounder. Javaris Davis, another cornerback, has a lot of speed, a lot of upside there that, he'll probably go late in the rounds too. And then a guy like Nick Coe, who has, freakish athleticism and ability. Didn't put it together this last season, dealt with some things both on and off the field, but, he's got the potential there. It's just a matter if he taps into it or not. He's another guy that, could go anywhere from Friday to Saturday in the draft. So you're looking at 8 guys there that could potentially have their name called. And then you never know if a team's going to take a ringer on, like a punter like Aaron Sipos. You don't usually see many punters taken, but there's a pretty good track record of Australian punters in the NFL these last few years. So maybe he gets drafted. If not, he'll certainly sign with the team right away.
All right. All good stuff, Tom. We really appreciate it. And before I let you go, I just got a comment. You look well groomed there. I'm pretty impressed with your quarantine haircut.
Yeah, I cut my own hair yesterday. First time I've done that in a few years, but I did it all through college. And yeah.
It looks good. I mean, it's well groomed. I mean,
I felt a little rusty at first, but it needed to be done. It's getting a little shaggy up there. So
I know we were joking about doing that before this interview. Do I actually have to change out of my sweatpants? Well, I like that you cut your hair. You got a nice little polo on, so looking good. You got your draft day ready, right?
Yeah. Probably the closest thing I have to a Miami Dolphins teal here. Got to rep the hometown a little bit. I'm sure they'll disappoint me somehow. They always manage to, but we'll see what happens.
I see where you went with that. I like it. Hey, I'm remaining neutral right here. I'm hail to the Redskins all the way. I'm a Virginia gal, but playing it neutral today. Playing it neutral. Hey, we appreciate your time and your insight, Tom. Always great. And, of course, we'll check in with you again tomorrow after the first round of the draft with any surprises, obviously updates, and everything else in between. We appreciate you jumping on with us.
Yeah, anytime. See you then.